So guys, today I'm going to review Saturday Night Fever, and I want to say that I'm actually doing a travel video, and what I'm going to do is go to a few pizza places that appeared in movies. So I'm going to go to Lenny's, which I meant to Luigi's. Luigi's is a pizza place in New York City that John Travolta went to in the beginning of Saturday Night Fever, and then there's also Lenny's, which appeared in Big Daddy, the Adam Sandler film, and then there's Mystic Pizza, which appeared in Mystic Pizza, the Julia Roberts film, and then there's Joe's, which appeared in Spider-Man 2. So, I saw Saturday Night Fever today again. I saw it a couple of years ago, but I really wanted to talk about this film, and it just reminded me of having a soda. That I definitely think it goes on one of the most important films of the 1970s. Of the new Hollywood era, where movies started to break away. Like in the 1960s, they got rid of the Hays Code, which meant there were a lot of rules in movies. Like, you had to limit the sex, you had to limit the violence, and other rules like, the bad characters couldn't be victorious at the end of the film. If a woman smokes a cigarette in a movie, they have to be the villain. So in the 1970s, after films like Bonnie and Clyde, Midnight Cowboy, A Clockwork Orange, in the later 70s, there was still that style of very gritty and intense movies, and Saturday Night Fever is an example of one of that. And really quick before I start is that I think that Saturday Night Fever, it was one of the first films that had two versions. Like there was a R-rated version, and then there was a PG version because it was so successful at the time. And obviously, since it was so successful, they wanted to just make all the money that they can. Same thing with Deadpool. Where there is a PG-13 version or a PG version, I believe, because there's kids who wanted to see them film, so they figured, it's Hollywood. Hollywood wants to make all the money that they can. But the film was about John Travolta's character, Tony, and he has a very bad family life. His dad always puts him down, and what happens is that his family idolizes his brother, who is a priest. And then Tony finds his escapism in being a dancer at a discotheque, and throughout the whole film, it's really just a coming of age journey for him. How he meets this dance partner. He meets this girl Stephanie, who is the same age as him. They're both in their early 20s, but she works. She's a typist, but she also works in New York City, and she meets celebrities like David Bowie, Laurence Olivier, and a few other ones. And he kind of I think through the movie really feels a sense of just wanting to be like her, really just growing up, and just surrounding himself by and just by her, because I think he loves her, he likes her. And he also has an inferiority complex, and that really plays out through the film. There's a lot of people with inferiority complexes, so I think that in the end, he kind of almost wants to be with her because he wants to feel a sense of, I feel like if I have a relationship with you, it's going to be like a catch-up type of thing where I can kind of progress myself and have some successes that I'm proud of, just like you. I want to be, I want to be on top type of thing. So, there's a lot of things that happen in this film that I want to talk about. And the first thing that I want to say is that this film really does a good job of being how should I kind of say this? When you watch the film, you really feel like you're in the late 1970s. The same way when you watch a film like Midnight Cowboy, you're in the late 1960s. You read The Season of the Witch, which was written by James Leo Herlihy, who wrote Midnight Cowboy. You feel like you're in the late 70s. The late 60s. So, this film really transports you into that time. I love the production design in the room. You see him have a you see Tony's John Travolta's character Tony. He has a picture of Bruce Lee in his room. He also has a picture of Al Pacino from Serpico, and like religion is a very important thing in his household. Like obviously his parents are Catholic. It's a huge honor for them for his brother to be in the Catholic Church, to be a priest, and also his friends are into sex, drugs, and music. So and those are really some really powerful things at that time. And then also too. They also talk about some really serious issues. Like, one of the characters gets a girl pregnant. He's looking to find a priest that can, give him a forgiveness because he wants to, because if he gets forgiveness, he wants his girl to get an abortion, but he wants a priest to kind of forgive them before it happens. And then also to Tony's Travolta's character is a racist. He uses the word nigger and spick, and there are some characters that are gay, so he calls them like a fag and other things like that. And his friends are the same way. Like they're all like very machismo Italians in New York City, so they definitely have their fair share of racism. And I actually do appreciate them being realistic about that because there are a lot of films that I think like a lot of people say, we have to take that out nowadays because it's too offensive, but you actually should keep that stuff in because that was very prevalent back in the 1970s. People were very openly racist. And I also think that another thing that was tough about this film is that they do talk about the sex culture at that time. Like, obviously, Tony there's this girl, I think Anita or Arnett, that is into him. So she kind of wants to dance with Tony at the beginning of the film, and then she's kind of like, well, because all my friends are having sex, I want to have sex with Tony, and then it doesn't happen. So she has sex with another guy, and she didn't really enjoy it, and she kind of felt bad afterwards. And it kind of looks like she wanted it to stop at a certain point, but it kept going on, and she kind of just doesn't act like it's a big deal. So it's definitely a sexual assault because she wanted to stop, and it kept on going. And she kind of like sad about that because there was a huge culture for a long, long time. Even when I went to high school in the 2000s of, having sex, a girl having sex, that was kind of like, a coming of age or, a passage into womanhood, or was seen as, well, everybody's doing it, I should do it type of thing. And then sometimes because sex can be painful for a woman when it happens for the first time, there's a sense of, please stop when it doesn't stop because, because there was this whole culture for a long time of if a guy's into it, you don't blue ball him, he has to kind of finish and whatever. So I kind of felt like they captured that well, just how sexual assault, and then also this need for women to have sex to feel like they fit in, how that was kind of a very unfortunate attitude. And then also with Travolta's character, it's kind of like hard too because at the end, he does sexually assault his girlfriend, his friend Stephanie, and it was kind of rough because I really think that they should have not had that in the movie because he was supposed to be this very charismatic character, but ultimately you kind of threw him under the bus a lot because he commits a sexual assault, and it's one of those things too that unfortunately, like when he's like has sex with her and she's not into it. I don't think it wasn't necessary, and they don't do enough of kind of making the audience kind of take in what he did. It's just kind of move on. It's almost like in Last Tango in Paris where Marlon Brando has the butter scene, and then the next scene he is lamenting about his wife. There's no sense of just, well, your character just did this, so we need to kind of spend some time with it. Like the only time it ever worked was in A Clockwork Orange. Like obviously Alex rapes a woman in A Clockwork Orange, and then the next scene he's talking to his friends or whatever. But it's just because his character is a sociopath in A Clockwork Orange, so he's not gonna meditate on his actions. But I think that again, and then at the end she kind of forgives him, and they talk and they decide to be friends. So I felt like what I liked about that was kind of very that was true about the rape culture back then, and then also like relationships and sexual assault culture, where sometimes people just saw a gray area or were like, okay, well, it's not a big deal because it's not like it's not like he inserted in her. He was just like was grabbing her. He was getting in the position, but he didn't like insert himself in her or whatever. But still, it is sexual assault. But what I'm trying to say is that back then in the '70s, she probably didn't think it crossed the ultimate line for her to call the cops or whatever. She kind of, but nowadays, she would have probably called the cops because there's so much education of if it starts with somebody like taking off your clothes or forcing themselves upon you, that is sexual assault. The same thing as if the rape and the insemination, whatever happened, and stuff like that. So I think that this film does kind of it really kind of showcases the sex culture and also the really unfortunate side of how sexual assault or people's education of sexual assault and people reporting sexual assault, how that wasn't how that was really, really decades behind where it needed to be. Fortunately, I think in the 2010s, there's a lot more education on just what sexual, about like how, even if it's somebody taking off your clothes or forcing themselves upon you, even though, many people say, well, sex didn't happen, penetration didn't happen, it's enough nowadays for people are more educated nowadays to kind of know that that's far enough to kind of like put somebody in jail for. So I think that for what it shows as far as sexual assault, and just how behind people were in the 70s, I think that it's very disturbing, but I also think it's very important to show because it kind of is a reminder of of the progress that needed to be made from the 70s and onwards. I also think that as a theme of this film, I think insecurity is one of the hugest themes of this film because obviously I like what Travolta's character was saying at the end, like everybody kind of dumps on everybody, and ultimately like that's been his entire character. Like the reason why he dances is because his father always puts him down, and and his family thinks highly of his brother because his brother is a priest until his brother stops being a priest, and also and then also too, like there's also a sense of coming of age. Like his brother's like saying, well, the only reason why I was kind of like a priest is because my parents want me to, and I feel like I was kind of molded. And Travolta's character, like he wants to be this dancer, and he likes dancing, he likes everything. But I think at the end he kind of wants to grow up and like have a good job and settle down and have more responsibilities. Even though I said it's because he's insecure and he wants to kind of be on the same level as Stephanie. And then also he kind of feels like he outgrows his friends or whatever. So I think that there's a huge sense of insecurity and inferiority complex that he has. But I also think that he, in some cases, I mean, like there's some good aspects of his character wanting to kind of grow up. I think that's likable about him because I know like a lot of times, and especially during the time in American history, there were a lot of teenagers around, and like during the 60s, there were a lot of teenagers who left their home to go to Woodstock or travel the country as hippies, and then in the 70s and 80s, this was kind of almost the start of the talk back culture. Kids can curse at their parents. It was very like taboo and shocking in the 70s, but it did kind of start in the 70s a little bit with kids feeling like they can kind of have a lot more freedoms. They don't need to do what their parents need to do, or they don't have to kind of orchestrate their lives into what their parents wanted to. Like, I think just because there was a lot more media back then to say that that's not every American household where the son must follow the father, or the daughter must follow the mother and the father's wishes. So I think that the fact that he talks back to his dad, and they also kind of really show that his dad has a inferiority complex. His dad has lost his job, has unemployment, and his son's doing better than him, financially. I think that it really shows the issues of inferiority complex, but also kind of showed how culture was kind of changing, where just the whole entire, everybody sit down and everybody respect the father and everybody respect the mother at the dinner table. That was kind of changing because I know in the 50s, the Leave It to Beaver culture of, the happy American family, that was the 50s, but in the 70s, that they started to show a little bit of family dysfunction. But really, it wasn't until like The Simpsons, I feel, where that became very, very mainstream, where people kind of accepted that most families are dysfunctional. So I like how they capture family dysfunction, and I also kind of like how they captured, and even though I won't call it I call it mental illness because I'm educated, but back then they didn't really call it mental illness. Like how Tony's father, Tony, and a lot of other people suffer from a really severe inferiority complex and the machismo attitude. And I have a lot of friends who are Italian and understand, like, in Italian families, like, definitely the machismo attitude or being the tough guy or being masculine or having bravado, that was kind of seen as a really big deal for generations. And it definitely plays out here. And then also, like, the wearing black leather. Who's that remind you of? Marlon Brando in The Wild Ones. So that whole bravado mentality was toxic masculinity, as we call it nowadays. That was kind of very prevalent back in the 70s. I think a few other things I want to just talk about with the film is that I also kind of think that, it does remind me of a couple of films. Like, it reminds me of Midnight Cowboy, which is my favorite film of all time, because it really shows the gritty side of New York City, urban decay. It also kind of reminds me of The French Connection and also Taxi Driver and a lot of other films. Like, I definitely think that if it wasn't for Midnight Cowboy and other films like this would have been made. And I also kind of like the fact that it was just showing another side of America, because when you watch the film, I love the opening, because, like, the opening, you kind of, like, there's silence in the opening, then you kind of hear, like, really just gritty, really just, like, traffic with people honking and being angry with each other. Then you hear, like, a subway, and it kind of you hear a subway, and then it kind of then it cuts to, like, dance music. I'm sorry. It cuts to, like, dance music, so I kind of like it because it kind of, like, really articulates what the film is about. It is a New York City story. It's a gritty story, but it's also about music and dancing, and I like how it kind of incorporates all of that, because this is a very polythematic film. And I think one of the successes of the film that is very polythematic. It's not a film that is like Grease, which John Travolta also did in 1977, where it's all, like, happy and whatever. This film was this was more gritty and dark, and that's also good because not every situation in life is gritty and dark, and also a lot of people resonated with that because real life is real life. Real issues are real issues, and I think that one of the reasons why New Hollywood was so popular was because back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the attitude in a lot of films was like, America is like the happy-go-lucky, Leave It to Beaver family. But when you saw films like Saturday Night Fever, it kind of says, no, that's not. That's all a stereotype. It's actually more gritty and darker than that. But I think that this is a really well-made film. I do think that, I was very surprised it was only nominated for best actor. Like, obviously the Bee Gees did the music for it, but all the songs that they did were stuff that they already did before. So if it was made for the film, then you could be nominated for best original score. But if it's something where the music has already been out there for a couple of years, then you can't be nominated. I think that rightfully so, it should have been nominated for cinematography, and it should have been nominated for art production and even best film, but and even, like, best original screenplay. But it was definitely a film that I felt that was definitely very under nominated, and the film, I think, cost like around $3.5 million, and it made close to $500 million or more. So it was very, very surprising that it didn't kind of get all the awards. Star Wars came out that year, and then also Annie Hall came out. So again, a lot of people, like, when they look back in 1977, a lot of people were very mad with the Oscars because they kind of felt that, Annie Hall, the Woody Allen film, it should have been Star Wars that won Best Picture, and even Saturday Night Fever. But it was kind of unfortunate that it didn't get the awards that it deserved. Rightfully so. But there's a lot of, like, talking points with this film. But I also think that, when I think about this film really deeply, I think it's a very good coming of age film. I think that it is about, to me, it really is a film about somebody who has a who is kind of like in their early 20s, like that, getting out of high school, getting out of college, living back home, or a few years after high school, still living at home, mentality. And a lot of kids there was a lot of like young kids at that time because of the baby boomer generation. And it kind of really spoke to that generation of, well, what's your mark on the world? And I also think that it does a good job of saying too of, what type of life, are you going to live / Tony's going to live if you kind of just hang out with the same immature people. Like, he has parents that don't really respect him, really pissed on his self-esteem. He has friends that are just not good friends. They just have sex irresponsibly. Sometimes they force themselves on women. They get into gang fights. They get into drinking. One of his friends kills himself at the end of the film. So he's definitely somebody that if he keeps up continuing his lifestyle, he's not going to like live to his 30s. So he almost like, so the film is almost like maybe a kind of message to younger people in the way of just, you're trying to find your identity. You're trying to like make yourself matter. There's constructive things like dancing and, having a good time. But then there's the dangerous side of that, of drugs and alcohol and looking for sex and in ways that you're either committing a crime or letting a crime happening to you. And it's just not going to end well. It kind of makes me think of the film Whiplash, where the character kind of says, and I hope to be like the greatest like musician of all time, and I'd rather just die on a heroin overdose and be considered one of the greatest musicians of all time than just die with nobody remembering me. And I think like what the writers of Whiplash said is that that's actually what's supposed to happen. Like, he really doesn't care about his own happiness. He cares about his legacy over going down a path of doom. And I think that, some films do that. And in Saturday Night Fever, it really is that. He doesn't care. Where Tony just says, where Tony kind of realizes that, he just doesn't like his friends anymore because it doesn't make him happy. And he likes Stephanie. So I think that if they ever, let's say there's a Saturday Night Fever 2, or they extended it another hour or whatever, and he marries her, he changes his life around, he kind of does the right thing. I think with a relationship with her, it's kind of would be good because it would kind of establish a sense of him constructively growing and evolving and changing because he's in a relationship with her. Even though, like I said, his relationship is based on his inferiority complex, which is definitely there. But it also kind of is a message to, a lot of people watch the film about, sometimes picking your friends and picking your lifestyle, picking who's in your life. If you are with other people who have an inferiority complex and you're around people who kind of add to your inferiority complex, it just doesn't end well. And he ultimately, like I said, I think if they showed him continuing this discotheque lifestyle and drinking and partying and friends, I think what would happen to him is that he and Stephanie wouldn't last, and he probably would have killed himself, by drugs or alcohol, or gang fight. But I think that if he chose a path to go with Stephanie, and I think that's where the movie leaves it, I think he would just turn his life around and just use her as a crux to kind of be motivated to change his life. And that's what the film kind of means to me. It's just, being around people who don't add to your inferiority complex, and being around people who are constructive. And and that's personal to me because there's this girl that I was really close friends with 10 years ago. We've been, friends for 4 or 5 years. But one of the things that I liked about her was that she kind of was dealing with a very hard situation in her life, and she just learned to move on quickly, find the right people, and make herself happy. And I've done that slowly but surely instead of feeling sorry for myself. She kind of inspired me to kind of leave the people that were hurting me, even if it was family, even if it was former jobs, or I switched jobs and I've had a friend for close to 10 years on my old job, but I try not to keep a relationship because just because of the immaturity, and then also just the negativity that this person has. So So that's what the film means to me. I think it is kind of like, about escapism, picking your friends, how dangerous an inferiority complex is, but also just, what type of friends are good. Like the ones that kind of motivate you to become better, or they inspire you to be better, versus like the friends that are just the regular band of jerks you hang out with, and maybe go nowhere, or just kind of toxic. So I think that this is a very powerful film. There's a lot of talking points. It should be revisited. I really think this film really needs to be revisited. It's definitely it's a very important film. It's a very, very important film.